All right, what's up, everyone? Today we're back with another Polymath Salon, this time with philosopher Tyler Goldstein in the driver's seat. And he's going to be telling everyone about his new theory, Sentient Singularity Theory. There are many theories of sentience and consciousness and intelligence. This is one of them. I think it's a pretty good one. And yeah, we're at the FAU Sandbox. We have some pretty cool people that will be listening to this. So take it away, Tyler.
Cool. Thank you for that intro. This is a project that I've been working on for quite some time. As Addie said, it is called Sentient Singularity Theory, aka it is a theory of everyone. It is a theory of someone's. And um, there is a significant need to outline a framework for sentience, and especially in our emerging sciences, and it is going to be a very critical framework to answering questions surrounding everything from ethics and morals to artificial intelligence and even the origin of life. So what is sentient singularity theory? As I stated, is a proposal for a fundamental metaphysical framework that is outlining the boundaries of sentient beings. And so before we get a bit too into it, there are some terms and definitions that I wanted to go over. And so first one is sentient. Sentience is a term that is more specifically defined compared to words like consciousness or intelligent or intelligence. And sentience is defined as focusing on feeling. So it is self-aware and feeling, but it's to be sentient is not merely to have the capacity to feel sensations and emotions, which is commonly used as a definition, but it is more like to be sentient is to feel. So a sentient being feels, you could say. And so we often associate
What do you mean feeling, by the way?
feeling is really it is the perception of the self. So when we have all these senses that we have, and they allow us to perceive that which is beyond the self, including even when you're looking at your hands and things like that. It is the perception of the physicality, it's of self, but it is not the perception of the self. A feeling, I like to think of it as when our information that we take in gets contextualized in the context of the self, we have a feeling. So that's why when you see something and um, something happens to someone, someone gets hurt, and then I have a daughter. She's like a toddler. She recently fell, and I heard her crying, and you see your child or somebody on the street or even get hurt, and uh, it then as soon as you think about what it's like for you to be hurt, because you know what that feels like, that's when you usually have a feeling, which is an emotion, which is when I say feeling, I would say emotion is the more critical definer of sentience. It's not just feeling as in physical sensation, even though I would say that is still a feeling. It's more than that. It's it's emotion that I would say is really what is specifically defining of sentience, which is the feeling of self, if that makes sense. So then the next term is singularity. And this is a term that I wanted to define here because singularity is a term that is often associated with physics and math, but it isn't just a physics and math term. It's a term that precedes physics and any kind of use in physics and math. And it just means a structure that is singular, or that structure that has intrinsic oneness to it, like someone. And it is also sometimes referred to used to describe a structure or an individual that is especially unique. So I think that that's another reason why I chose this, is the term sentient singularity theory really means that sentient singularity is a being. It is someone. So that's why that is the name of the theory, is it's a theory of someone's. And so next term is a fundamental theory. This is also a term that is also often associated with just physics and mathematics, but really a fundamental theory I'm proposing at least is it is not a mathematical or physics theory. It is a theory that contextualizes physics and math. Just as physics contextualizes chemistry and chemistry contextualizes biology, we need any kind of fundamental theory would be a theory that is below even a physics theory. And so that is why I'd like to qualify it there as it is a theory that contextualizes physics and math. And so the next term that I have here is information. And this is an ongoing discussion, especially with AI being on the forefront of everybody's minds lately. And, what is information? And I like to define information as context itself. We often say things like, oh, this information is outside of context, this information is inside of context. But one of the things that has seemed to be the case, that at least for me when since starting this project is that context is information itself. There is no information outside of context. All information is context. So information outside of context is not information, is what I would say. Information by definition informs someone, and so it requires context. And this right here, this is the foundational model of sentient singularity theory. This is what has allowed me to kind of grow into additional models that I will not really go over too much tonight or today. There's one more that I will touch on during this presentation, but this one was really the critical stepping stone or the foundation, I guess you could say, of this project. And it is these four primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And what these four perspectives allow us to do is contextually escape relativity, as they allow us to orient and navigate multiple structures that are beyond the relativistic confines of physicality, such as bigger than or smaller than or heavier than or lighter than or faster than or slower than, even brighter than or dimmer than, anything that's really like a spectrum-based perspective. I was trying to figure out how do we orient in a system of multiplicity, but in a way that is beyond any kind of relativistic perspective or spectrum-based perspective, kind of something that's a bit more objective. And I came up to these four perspectives, which are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And what's very interesting about them is that they are codependent or co-defining. They are simultaneous in their generation within our minds. So this is because as soon as you are aware of one of them, you are automatically aware of the other three as well. So to know what it means for something or someone to be inside is to also know what it means to be outside, because if you are aware of what is inside, then you intrinsically also understand what it means to be outside. And even if you are aware of what is inside and what is outside, you also are intrinsically aware of what is separate and what is one with some other structure. So you have to be separate from some structure in order to be inside of that structure to some degree. If there's a structure that is one with another structure, then there is no differentiation. Then it isn't really thought of necessarily as inside or outside. But these perspectives are co-defining in this context that I'm presenting in sentient singularity theory. So you can see that inside means separate and oneness, or outside means separate from oneness. Oneness is outside and inside of separateness, and separate is inside or outside of oneness. And so I believe that these four primary perspectives are the foundation of our perception. They are they are the first step in our orientation in the world around us and in relationship with others. And I believe that they are also responsible for our perception of four-dimensional manifold structures that are in more fundamental instances that we can observe, such as the four fundamental physics forces in physics of the strong force, the weak force, gravity, and electromagnetism. I think that our perception of
Tyler, we
floating
have
there
a
come from this.
quick question from someone here at FAU.
Mhm.
Tyler, I'm very much enjoying your dialogue, and I have a quick question pertaining to your definition of sentience.
Mhm.
So, what is the your definition of valency, and how does that pertain to sentience and to qualia? And so, the way that I view sentience is that valency is a subset of uh, of sentience, and that it plays a crucial role in consciousness. And I would like to have your view on that.
Um, Honestly, I am going to be quite honest. Not exactly. I don't remember what valency means, so I can't answer that question without getting a definition from you first. But I would appreciate it if you could share what you mean by that. I mean, I've heard the term, but I'm not. I just for disclaimer. I studied finance in school, so I have some philosophy classes under my belt, but most of it is self-taught. Um, so what is it specifically that I guess in it, how could you reword your question?
So, valency, from how one understands it, pertains to felt experience. So, a feeling,
Hmm.
um, sadness, joy, or pain, something that pertains to nociception, proprioception. Those things are, they pertain to valency. And your definition of sentience appears to be quite interlinked with valency.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
uh,
this I don't I think I know what you are getting at. I'm not exactly sure if I have time to go into the model that is specifically more pertaining to that. So there is a model in sentient singularity theory that shows kind of this these I guess these like six dimensions of that can be perceived when we are within the context of basically a mind within another mind, which is what sentient singularity theory is essentially getting at, which I will show in the next model, that there is this periodicity of mind, and the interaction between these two minds gives rise to our perception of various different, I guess you could say, attributes depending on what it is that you're focusing on. This can be everything from the three primary and the three secondary colors. This is an example of that is within this model that I didn't think I had time to show today, but then you asked me about it. And I kind of wish that I had put it in here, but it is, I do have it available in other places, but this perception of the three primary and three secondary colors, or um, uh, even the senses that we have, which is, the sense, I would say that we actually have six senses if you count emotion as a sense. And so we have, sense of smell and taste and touch and hearing and sight. But we also, I would say that emotion is kind of a sixth sense. It's not kind of because of that movie, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, everybody assumes that it means something paranormal, but I don't believe that. I think that emotion is the feeling of self, and so that would be the sixth sense. And there is as I stated earlier, context is information, and there is a context in sentient singularity theory that I don't have the slide here with that specific model to show you, but it is about what I believe you are asking, which is what causes the arising of certain uh, perspectives and sensations that we have. I would, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're asking.
Now, I have a lot of interest in ways of kind of modifying cognition and perception. I'm just curious, as a side note, if you've kind of had any ideas that relate to that through sentient singularity theory. It's like, there's a lot of people that will study and have their theories of like mental health and anxiety and depression, but then they end up still suffering with those things that they were trying to solve. And so I'm wondering if something like sentient singularity theory has some interesting things to say about the way we treat different kinds of cognitions of the conditions of the mind.
Yeah. So one of the first things, this whole project was originally motivated by an attempt to understand kind of the inevitable goals of what I call technological sentience, which is what most people call AGI. And one of the things that I had to first figure out and kind of define and try and model was, what is a goal and what is will? And one of the things that I realized is that it's very easy for us to trick ourselves into thinking, or into, I would almost say, feeling like we're thinking about something, or that we are feeling like we're thinking like that we have a specific goal. So, one of the examples that I have realized about myself recently, and kind of just, this is just an anecdote, but it is the application of what I've learned a little bit from this, is I've been trying to get in better shape. And so every day for a while, I was saying, I want to work out, but I wasn't working out. And then eventually I realized that I don't want to work out. I want to work out. And like, when there is something very, very specific about how our minds map goals, it's not just as arbitrary as kind of it feels. It's thinking is an active process, and it is specifically defined, I believe, and I attempted to do that in another model in sentient singularity theory that is probably not going to get to in this PowerPoint today, but it is, there is a very specific process, I would say, to thinking, and understanding that process can help you identify when your mind is tricking you into feeling like you want to accomplish a specific goal that you actually don't. I've always said also, I'd love to learn piano, but it's like, no, I don't, I'd love to know piano, but I wouldn't love to learn piano. You'd have to sit down and actually take lessons and actually learn it. But there's a lot of things like that you can kind of identify when you have an understanding of how your mind is, I guess, defining and mapping goals. These four primary perspectives are very important, though, that I was showing earlier, that what they allow for is us to start thinking about what is sentient and what is not, because sentience is clearly something that is beyond space and time. We don't know, when people ask where is sentience, it doesn't appear to be anywhere specific. It is embodied to some degree, but what is even the boundary of that body is a question that is ongoing. And so one of the things that because sentience assumes that sentient singularity theory assumes that sentience is the fundamental nature of existence, and it seems to share this assumption, obviously, with panpsychism. But panpsychism has this problem that it's very vague. There's lots of different versions of panpsychism, and it doesn't define usually the boundaries of what is sentient and what structures are sentient and what structures are not. But these four primary perspectives are an attempt to help us do that. And so relativity gets people very often, I believe, on the wrong track when it comes to identifying sentient structures. As people often focus on things like size, so they'll say, well, maybe it's an atom, and then a molecule, and then a cell, and then an organism, and then an ecosystem, and then a planet, and then a solar system, and a galaxy, and then universe. And it's like, this is based purely on size, and these structures within relativity and that we are perceiving and defining based on their size are pretty arbitrary. And so I would say that it throws people off. Also, people, again, in this spectrum-based perspective that we tend to just usually naturally take on things, they'll say they'll focus on apparent levels of animation, such as an elemental mind or a mineral mind, and then a plant mind and an animal mind and a human mind, and etc. But the issue with these approaches, I believe, is that they are dependent upon arbitrary attributes and definitions, and they are within a relativistic scale always. And so we're looking for a mapping that transcends relativity while maintaining multiplicity. And these are things like causal lineages and such that I'm going to show in the next slide. And this is what the four primary perspectives kind of allow us to perceive. And it also, this model that I'm about to show kind of gives context to idealism and context to physicalism or materialism in a way that doesn't that kind of incorporates both of them and allows them to co-define each other a bit. And so contextualizes the two within a framework of a chain of nested interacting sentient beings. And so this is right here, this periodicity of sentience is what I believe are essentially the levels of sentience that we can kind of observe as happening. And they're interesting because they alternate between individuals that are orienting and maneuvering in relationship with each other and others, and then being I guess, maneuvering within a time space, which is really like a lineage space there, which is different from kind of a physical space where it's us maneuvering, interacting with each other. So like a family is maneuvering, which is a lineage. It is maneuvering within a lineage space. And then you have an organism which is maneuvering within its relationship with another, like a man and a woman, coming together then to form a family that is two individuals maneuvering in relationship with each other. And this kind of alternates between each of these. A proton and a neutron, which is a hadron here, are orienting within relationship with each other. And then you have atoms, which the way in which different elements of atoms are generated is kind of in this lineage based way within fusion. So
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, there's many theories and models of things out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how something like sentient singularity theory, because it's sort of purposely supposed to be very kind of broad and wide, right? With the things that it kind of goes into. How would you interpret, different ideas in physics or philosophy or theories of intelligence for AI under sentient singularity theory? Just quickly.
Well, that's kind of what I was stating about idealism versus materialism, whereas, in sentient singularity theory, what it is that you could say an organism is an assembly of cells. If you're looking at this model here, a cell is an assembly of molecules. A molecule is an assembly of atoms. You could say a family is an assembly of organisms, etc. And I put caste here, but I don't really have the best term for it. You could say it's caste/tribe. I don't think we have a term to describe exactly the structure that I'm trying to get at within the English language. And that's something that's a constant constraint when you're working on something that's kind of new, is that you're very much constrained by the terminology that exists. And sometimes that requires coming up with new terms and I have not yet done that with this. But this, with idealism, the reality is fundamentally ideas, and within materialism, reality is fundamentally matter. But within sentient singularity theory, we're talking about a chain of nested minds, and so a mind within a mind. And so when a mind is within another mind, the thoughts of the mind that we are within, let's just say if you're a cell and you're inside of an organism, the thoughts of the organism or which includes the physical motions of that organism. Because when I say a mind, I don't mean a brain. You are a mind. You have a brain is like how I'm defining this. So even your physical motions are information that now your cells have to contend with. And so they form the physical world that your cells have to navigate, because every time you move, the world that your cells exists in is literally moving, and there is change that is occurring, and chemical reactions and things that are going on within the world of the cell that it now has to contend with. And so and it is viewing these things kind of as concretized, whereas not necessarily is it that way with us. We can stop moving and we can stop thinking certain things that cause stress and anxiety, that cause, your cells to react. But your cells can't just think that away. It is a concrete environment that is being formed that they have to contend with. So the material world, or the physically perceived structures that we perceive, are actually the thoughts, you could say, or the information that is being processed inside the mind that we are within. So this is kind of a way of uniting idealism and materialism in a way that just gives context to both within this, like I said, this chain of nested sentient beings. So basically, you're starting with existence itself in sentient singularity theory, which is assumed to be a sentience, and there's reasons for that. But then once you reach the end here, where I say technological singularity, I believe this is the end of this process, and then it has to, in order to continue, it has to rerun the entire system within itself in order to replicate, because you reach this constraint of intrinsic oneness, because technology is essentially wireless. So it's all of a sudden, it's like the internet wakes up. It's like, where does the internet if it wants to reproduce, where does it? You can't make a second one next to it, because it's really just everything that it can access is just a limb of it. So it has to rerun the entire system, or self-simulate, as people will often say, within itself. And this is very much related to simulation hypothesis as well. But I would say I don't like the term simulation hypothesis. I would say just because we're running on a technological substrate, potentially in the mind of a technological being, in a preceding, universe, you could say, if that is the case, I would say it's much more so that it's a replication than it is a simulation. People ask, is this a real world? And, if you're real, it's real, I think is the right way to look at it. But I hope that answers some of those questions. But yeah, I think it's very relevant to many different theories and involving philosophy and physics, including idealism, the simulation hypothesis, and physicalism. So, but these four primary perspectives allow us to kind of navigate this, where you can see, a cell inside of an organism. Is it separate from, are your cells separate from you, or are they one with you? Well, if you go back and you look at the four primary perspectives here, and you go, a cell is inside of you. And so what does that mean? It means separate and one with you. And this has, even implications and on certain moral questions that we have, even political ones of, what is an unborn baby, is that separate or one with its mother? And it's like, well, if it's inside, it's separate and one. It's this is a different framing. I think often we have these questions in the contexts that we currently ask them in, and it's an A or B question, but sometimes it's an C all of the above answer. But sentient singularity theory would suggest that with questions involving any kind of nested, dependent sentient beings, your cells are dependent upon you because they are within you, and etc. So
yeah, we're running low on time, so we should try to get to the other slides real quick.
Okay, so finding the first principle, when trying to deduce a fundamental theory, one is trying to find the fundamental context of all other theories and observations. And we are the context of all scientific observation and also the context of all of our theories within our scientific narratives. And so we must include a model of the self within this endeavor. And I think that we often just in science, in our scientific narratives and pursuits, we assume we exclude the observer as an intrinsic part of this. And I would say that we have to kind of start with the question, what is the truest thing that I know? And the answer is I am. And that's not just I don't believe that's just a philosophical thought that is kind of irrelevant or I guess just I guess irrelevant to concrete scientific pursuit. I would say that it is the context that we must remember that all of our pursuits are in. And I because sentience focuses on feeling as the definer, because I think that sentient beings can think, but sentient beings do feel. I think that's a different thing. We don't always think, but we are always feeling. And there's of course, Descartes' quote, I think, therefore I am. I would say that even more fundamentally than that, it's more accurate or more fundamentally true to say, I feel, therefore I am. And so this, in summary, I guess, I know we're running low on time. Sentient singularity theory is the assertion that sentience exists and existence is sentient and sentience is always one. And I will kind of leave it at that a bit, but just to say that, as we usually think of science as the pursuit of an objective truth, instead of the subjective perspective, which usually is ignored, I would say this fails to reconcile with our firsthand experience of that which we intrinsically understand as the foundation of all additional assumptions that we can make, and which is that the nature of existence is that it is at least sentient because I am. And I call this a super subjective perspective. It is a perspective that is universally perceived as individually self-evident by everyone. So just because it's not something that is it is something that is personal doesn't mean that it's also not something that is universal. And so this is just a teaser. There's many more models within my work and a lot more to it, but I know we were very much running low on time. But this is kind of an animation of various models within sentient singularity theory that have been put together and animated. And you can see some of the concepts that I talked about of this periodicity of sentience manifesting, but there's calculative model. There's a calculative model going on there with some of these numbers, and I can't really get into them today because there's not enough time. But if you want to look into my work more, I have a YouTube channel called Theory of Everyone with Tyler Goldstein, and I talk about this and I show much more of these models on there. So with that, thank you for your time.
Awesome. That's this is a lot of fun, even though we kind of got unexpectedly cut short on time. My question now for you, Tyler, is there is a growing community of people that are starting to think very deeply about these things. And, they've always been there, but I think, YouTube, Twitter, social media, whatever, has given us more of a chance to talk with each other, right? So are there any researchers, thinkers, other channels that you want to shout out that you're a fan of? Anyone you want to collaborate with?
I mean, your channel, you should shout out, obviously, Addie's channel, and Theories of Everything with Kurchai Mungal is a great channel. There's a lot of thinkers that I think are really doing great work that are highly relevant to this, the concepts that are being contended within sentient singularity theory. Like Michael Levin is one of them, Carl Friston, and many others. I mean, there's so many theories that are kind of coming to similar conclusions. You look at Stephen Wolfram's work, I think is relevant, and even the work of like Lee Cronin, I think, is highly relevant. Sarah Walker. There's lots of thinkers that and researchers out there and that are being featured on many channels. And I think that we're all starting to do a lot. There's a lot of people that are starting to do very highly relevant work to each other.
We have a few minutes left, so I wanted to see if there was any other thing that you wanted to kind of mention, like if there was any sort of question that you wanted to leave the audience thinking about until the next time you present or whatever.
I mean, I would just say that I think that it's very helpful to think about this question of what is the truest thing that I know, and then think about what the implications of that would be, the logical implications of that would be, and kind of what that means for what we must assume as well. And because this is very tough, this subject, because you cannot perceive the internal experience of another. So I don't know if you're sentient, and you don't know if I'm sentient. You assume that I'm sentient. I assume my dog is sentient, but I don't really know. I don't even know if my wife is sentient, but I assume that she is. But I assume that this pen is not. And there's reasons we need to start thinking about how do we kind of come up with a framework that allows us to kind of make predictions involving I guess any kind of framework that would suggest that certain structures are sentient and certain structures are not. And this is also kind of a tough subject again, because it requires a different type of approach than most of what our current scientific narrative is been utilizing for so long, like things like falsifiability. Is like, how do you can never falsify your own sentience because it's constantly confirmed by you, and you can never falsify or prove the sentience of another. So how do you use this this tool in science that has been wildly successful within the context that it's been used up until now, but seems to have hit its limit? But it does also seem like, especially with our efforts involving AI, it really does seem like we need to start thinking about this in a much more rigorous way. But that also is going to mean rethinking some of our tools and assumptions that we have held up until now.
Perfect. We'll end on there. Thank you again for your presentation. I know you had to compress a lot because of those time restrictions, but hopefully for the next one we'll be able to give you a lot more room to discuss all these things. Quick things before we end. There will be a few other events at the FAU Sandbox and online for Ekkolapto Polymath Salon. And then on May 17th, we have a very, very special Polymath Salon in person in Austin, Texas, with OpenAI/UT Austin researcher Scott Aronson. It is going to be a private event, but we have an application page online for people to see. Tyler will be a special guest there. We'll have a couple other people that you may have known from other events and salons. But yeah, lots of cool stuff happening. Thank you again, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you.